All right, some of you guys have been asking for more of these unscripted post-workout thoughts and videos, and this one isn't totally unscripted because I looked into this a little bit. But in this video, I want to talk about what the early golden era bodybuilders were using as far as equipment in the Gold's Gym, Venice Beach, 1965, 1975 time period, and maybe even a little bit of the later silver era bodybuilders, which I think the cutoff of that was like 1960s. And why I want to focus on that era is because if you actually look at the equipment that is in Gold's Gym, Venice at that time, it's essentially the exact same gym template we were finding in most commercial gyms. And I'd also add, if a lot of you guys are obviously watching this for home gym equipment ideas and maybe some motivation here, because this was certainly motivation for me going back and looking into this, is that basically that essential bare bones basic equipment built some tremendous bodies and physiques that really started turning a shift in tide during that time period. Now, of course, there were other substances introduced during that time period, which you can obviously kind of see, but also right in that later silver era time period, you guys can see some tremendous physiques being built. Granted, the equipment was somewhat limited, and even the training principles were also a little bit in their early to kind of later formation stages, what we kind of see now. So I did a somewhat mini deep dive into the equipment that was inside Gold's Gym Venice at that time. Like I said, really influenced the whole world, not just the United States. But then later, I just want to break down and discuss what are those key pieces of equipment that you guys can take advantage of, say in the gym, but also if you guys are building a home gym like this, granted there's a lot more pieces in here, a lot of things, especially with modern day manufacturing, shipping costs, you can essentially build a mini Gold's Gym, all the basic stuff they have on a very minimal footprint and also budget. Certainly though, guys, share your opinions down below in the description box. I'm sure I'm not going to cover all the areas. Definitely enlighten me and others on some other equipment and modalities that they were taking advantage of. And as always, helps keeps the light on if you guys check out the affiliate links down below and everything featured in this video, as well as some exclusive promo codes for some of this equipment. But at the very least, if you like this content, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. Now, the reason I want to focus in on Gold's Gym Venice, many of you guys already know this, but Joe Gold, the originator and owner of Gold's Gym, he was a machinist, I think in the Merchant Marines is what I heard. So a lot of this equipment was pretty much handmade and built to some specifications. And a lot of this stuff was either totally novel to that specific gym or greatly influenced in later generations. Of course, we'd probably say modern day equipment is much superior to what we were seeing here, but be that as it may, a lot of these things are just kind of more creature comforts and not necessarily advances in where it counts and actually building lean body tissue and what these things are capable of. Again, we got to put context here. What you were seeing is a microcosm of some of the best bodybuilders in the world in this small gym. So of course you got genetics playing a role, just a perfect storm of people in that environment. And of course, other substances that were introduced at that time, but I will again refer back to the later silver era people that built tremendous physiques, such as Reg Park, Leroy Colbert, Steve Reeves, and John Grimmick, to name a few, assuming you guys start and be consistent. So let's first look at the more obvious examples of equipment, that being free weights, barbells, and dumbbells. Goes without saying, probably the vast majority, and even to that later silver era, that's all they essentially had, with some very primitive benches. The benches were either homemade, pretty much just straight flat benches, or they were very makeshift kind of incline. I don't think I really saw many decline benches. I know at Vince Gironda's gym, he actually had a lot of stuff was done standing. So these benches you would kind of prop up and do things like standing incline presses with barbells, standing curls, standing shoulder presses. So they did have like standing benches at that time, but the benches were very primitive. And even the bench press didn't really come out to kind of more popularity until like that later mid 20th century. You started people actually incorporating the bench press. So it kind of goes without saying that's maybe why you don't see a whole lot of benches really using popularity until like maybe the 50s, and then obviously the 60s started seeing these in abundance. But pretty much bare bones, plates, barbells, and dumbbells built tremendous physiques and bodies. I don't think that you really have to say a lot with that, but it is worth noting that the vast majority of work done was pretty much done on that equipment. And then aside from like the free weights, stuff you were actually posted up on, you saw the advent of the preacher curl machine, which I believe was initially invented by Vince Gironda. He had like the standing preacher curl, but otherwise you saw a basic preacher curl kind of standing there. That is something I do not have, and after doing and looking some footage for this video, probably gonna end up buying a preacher curl just for some nostalgia purposes, but also just kind of try it out because I used to do the preacher curl for some time. But that was a staple. You might have saw some homemade like wooden stools for things like calf raises or to kind of raise yourself off for say T-bar rows. I did actually have my neighbor Mac make me a limited run of these calf blocks or multi-purpose kind of step stools for a number of reasons. So let me know if you guys are interested in this. And then aside from the free weights, you had your basic pulley type mechanism or setup. That was probably one of the biggest minor iterations that you guys started seeing during that time, which I love cables for a number of reasons because of kind of that line of action, keeping constant tension on a muscle. So I'm not gonna say it's always superior, but if you're doing something, say a lying pullover compared to, say, a cable pullover. You get that nice continuous tension, you get a nice range of motion, even things for certainly as like tricep related work where you get that nice constant tension with the pulley. And then Joe Gold did create his own pulley cable crossover type setup that was notoriously very high. I think I read somewhere it was around 10 feet tall. I don't even think it was adjustable, but being that high, you got these great big stretches, great big range of motion that even if you watch kind of like the way they do flies, it was these very deep stretches in flies that many to this day maybe might not consider because of maybe aggravate your shoulder. But regardless, the point was that definitely increases that stretch and big range of motion in those pulleys that were famous. And then anything else your brain could think of with pulleys and pull downs, I'm sure that you maximize that machine for that. One of the biggest apparatuses of machines that I don't really think they use that much based on some of the footage I saw was the infamous universal machine that was just coming around during that time period. It was this big solid hunk of metal that I think was billed as or sold to the idea that you have this nice constant tension and variable resistance throughout a range of motion, much like a lot of the machines that came later, such as Nautilus. So you had your typical stations like a chest station, seated shoulder station. I think there was a lat pull down station from what I can see. Aside from that big thing, the only other stuff I can really make out and find was they didn't have any such thing as a leg press machine. Of course, they had a squat rack station that we've seen in many shots from that era, but they had the vertical leg press that Joe Gold also himself created. I'm not sure if he originated that, but that was again the only kind of leg press in the time before we saw the kind of 45-degree leg press that we commonly see. And I believe there was some sort of a seated calf raise set up there as well. And if I didn't already say, but I think it's kind of obvious, they also took advantage of a variety of calisthenic exercises like pull-ups. Even the famous kind of Manador setup dip station was also featured, I believe, at either Vince Duranda's gym or Gold's gym as well. So that was something you saw back then that you still see to this day. That is pretty much the most and the extent of all the equipment that built some of those tremendous bodies and physiques during that time period. And again, we're focusing on Gold's gym, but if you compare it to other famous gyms during that time period, I think I already alluded, if I didn't, to Vince Duranda's gym. Of course, Lou Ferrigno's gym, watching the movie Pumping Iron, was essentially like a closet. Most people's home gyms were actually bigger than that. It had more equipment than that, basically barbells, and it seemed like just one pulley, lat pull down station. So when you take all that in consideration and you're trying to build yourself a home gym, and especially with this environment, with the way things are built, with a lower ceiling, the way they're very easy cost of entry, while definitely weights can be expensive, but especially if you buy like overseas weights, they're not that expensive. Higher quality weights are gonna be a little more expensive. You can get a decent squat rack that of course does all the basic barbell exercises. We have the luxury now of having some very sophisticated adjustable dumbbells that for sure are not cheap, but definitely if you're doing this back in the day, buying a full adjustable dumbbell rack would cost you a lot of money, especially during that time. And the next thing you would have is some sort of basic pulley. And I think if you wanted to replicate, other than the cable crossovers, some of the basic movements they were doing, some lat pull downs, tricep press downs, bicep curls, with a plate, even a lot of stuff was plate loaded back then too. You can buy some racks. In fact, the last video I did showed a $300 rack at a basic pulley that honestly for me would take up probably the vast majority of pulley work that I would take advantage of, did the job totally fine. And the rest of the stuff is really icing on the cake. And while they do make multi-station gyms for the home use, I think if you've got some sort of lever gym or leverage-based setup, you guys are seeing the Quantum Trainer in this video. I think it is the best version. Shameless plug, there's a link down below for a discount. Something like this really covers all your bases for a basic chest press, shoulder press, even a lat pull down station that's plate loaded. Other single joint machines that are totally not essential, but it would have cost you a lot more money back then, especially even a few years ago, that are very cheap and expensive. It just covered a very cheap $100 calf raise machine that I would say probably does just as much or if not better functionality than those calf raise machines they had back in the day. And then there's other staples we don't even see till the 80s. Of course, there's more sophisticated Nautilus single joint machines, but even the basic leg curl, leg extension machines, or a 45-degree leg press. They did have the hack squat. That was something I didn't mention, so this might look familiar. Basic hack squat setup, you can see it, Vince Duranda's gym. But other than that, all this other stuff was stuff that it seems to be they're very minimally used. That's why it makes sense these guys were very strong. They built great bodies and physiques using the bare bone essential equipment. And so there of course were things that they did not have or didn't mess with that you guys might get some benefit out of, that you might have also personal preference, such as resistance bands. I use those a lot. Pretty much 1 or 2 exercises per workout or some sort of resistance band is incorporated in that. Some of you guys love kettlebells. And then there's other novel machines that are out there that could probably save the back and joints of most people, because again, the big elephant in the room is that these people were pretty young and also had some special recovery substances. So in later age, like you guys are like me, when you get beyond your kind of close to your middle-aged time period in life, you might not be optimally functioning as well. So some of these heavy, you know, clang and bang type exercises might not be as good for you, and that's where you can kind of fine tune and find this stuff that works. But that is it, guys. I think I covered everything. I was trying to find one condensed video that really summarized this. Shout out to Golden Era Bookworm, who actually, I think I did find some good information on his website, and there were some other people as well, but I know that guy was a great resource. So shout out to him, check out his channel as well, and I'll see you on the next video.